coming to our invitation to come to discuss a super important topic. You all know that Ukraine has been for 4 years now at a large-scale war. The US, that we were counting on as a global democratic leader, are now refusing global democratic leadership. Europe is now alone with the challenges and threats that we face from Russia, and something has to be done about it. So that's why we are here with this wide circle of colleagues, from soldiers to generals, from the just civilians living in the residential areas most bombarded and shelled by Russians. In our event, we have four famous experts present. I will present them. Then we will be able to talk via Zoom with the European Union representatives who are now online with us from EU countries. And then we will have an opportunity to ask questions. And to those in Zoom, we will be able to have direct contact. We will have interpretation. We have three languages: Ukrainian, English, Russian. Russian because we have representatives of peoples oppressed by Russia who are not speaking Ukrainian, so they will speak English or Russian. Russian's okay because our event is broadcast, and many people in Russia and other countries where Russian-speaking people live, they will be able to hear it. So I want to present the present parties. Igor Vechernya, MP of Ukraine, Deputy Head of the Committee of National Security and Defense, and Igor Ostapenko, Vice Prime Minister of Institute of Global Policies, Vadim Skibitsky, Deputy Head of the Intelligence, General Major, Anita Jamic, who is the Ambassador of Croatia in Ukraine. We're so thankful for your presence. Zhetra Grenadier, veterans of armed forces from Croatia, who also knows what war is and what price we'll pay for war, so he will share some Croatian experience as well as Ukrainian experience, because he knows both. Then we'll have Taras Zahorodny, but he is arriving a bit later. He's a famous political expert, and I think you'll know him. Alexei Baginets, a lawyer, PhD in law, several times first Deputy General Prosecutor of Ukraine. So it will be important to hear him. Yuri Andreychuk, who is the director of Center of Monitoring and Environmental Safety of the State Environmental Academy. Yuri Chernov, who is the president of Kharkiv Diplomatic Club. Valery Yuzba, who is the president of the Ukrainian Trade Economic Mission. Yuri Yerukhin, who is vice president of the Institute of Global Policy. Mohamed Tariev, who is one of the leaders of the Committee of Ingushetia Independence, and not only a committee in Ingushetia Independence, he will tell more about himself. He works closely with the oppressed nations of Russia, Buryatia, Yakutia. So he used to work at Radio Freedom. He knows a lot. Pavlo Zhovnirenko, who is the head of the management of Institute of Strategic Studies, Center of Strategic Studies. Alexander Petula, who is the president of Federation of SPAS, of National Martial Arts Union. Alexander Pasechnik, who represents, Sergei Pasechnik, sorry, who represents one of the units of the Airspace Agency. Tetsulan Hunya, who's a chaplain, former active duty servant from special forces, has gone through Afghanistan as well as served a trip to Ukraine. Mikhailo Melnikov, who is the lieutenant in reserve, who represents the Union of Veterans of Military Reconnaissance, and there's also the advisor to the Minister Ali Bekirov, but he's not there. I would like to give the floor to Yegor Chernev, and then we'll see those who will want to speak. I will give you the floor. Thank you and good morning. So today we have the same challenges with Europe. Because we all face the challenge of Russia. And the existence of Russian Federation, the way it is now, is a double threat, or a threat in two directions. First is the threat of direct clash with Europe, with the subsequent war. Second threat is the necessity to have the security net protecting us from the US. And in this kind of dependence, where we could lose agency or ability to act. So the only one way to get our agency back as Europe, to become the actual main player on Eurasian or European continent, is the disassembling, the disintegration of Russia as it is now. That will deprive the U.S. of having necessity to be present here, and you can see that the U.S. is basically giving away of the leadership to Europe.
So they're saying that Europe has to take care of their own security from now on. And we see some activities in the EU in terms of the United European Army or Defense Alliance. Macron used to talk about it some 10 years ago. Now it's as relevant as never before. So currently Europe unfortunately doesn't have the means to fight off Russian Federation. And again, in the long term, in the long run, the most effective method of defense for Europe is, again, the disintegration of Russian Federation as it is now, as a threat for Europe, and one of the elements of pressure from the US. With this current registration, US administration, because of that threat. How this disintegration can happen, that Russian Federation ceases to exist as it is now? I think two things can make it happen. Economic pressure, which is what our partners are now exercising. And although it does have impact on the economy through sanctions, etc., but we see that Russia is still retains some strength to continue the war. But why? Let me explain why this can become a reason. Because economic pressure can indeed lead to certain forces being activated in Russia, where each part of Russia will feel that their quality of life diminishes. The revenues of those regional elites decrease drastically, and they are now feeding on Russian economy. Second reason, or second cause, or part that can have an impact on some processes within Russian Federation is the death of Putin and the start of redistribution within the Russian Federation of their influence. And then again, it's the regional elites or regional movements that can lead to disintegration of Russian Federation, or if not disintegration, then dismantling. I like how Valery Pecker talks about it, like dismantling it into a confederation where there's more freedom for largely independent entities within a certain territory. For Europe, indeed, even this kind of scenario bears certain threats, because different disparate parts of this confederation can be, to some extent, a destabilization factor. But still, all of that is in the short-term perspective. And you don't have to be afraid of that. We've been there in 1991, where Bush Sr. would come here talking that you don't have to disband the USSR because they may lead to destabilization. So we can also suggest the same thing to other players in the Russian Federation who basically conned us for Budapest Memorandum and exchanged the arms for economic goods and economic assets, whichever arms will remain with those independent states. So I think, unfortunately, while the Russian Federation is like this, there will be threats from Russian Federation. There are not many options to get rid of this threat in a long-term perspective. At the moment, I don't see them, and I think Vadim will support what I say, that Russian Federation is ready to end this war and stop their aggression, not only aggression against Ukraine, but other European countries. In order to defend ourselves, in order for the Europe to defend itself, we need to be proactive. And we need to have an impact on what's happening in Russian Federation as well. Thank you, Yegor. And so after this kind of intervention, I would like to pass the floor to Margaret Teriv, who is the representative of one of the nations oppressed by Russia. He knows the situation in Russia. I think you will be interested to hear what he says about the situation in Russia. And what are the chances of dismantling of Russian Federation in the nearest perspective? Good morning. I was preparing to speak in English. So if I will speak English, maybe not many people will understand. So I'm Magomed Teriv. I'm from the Committee of Ingushetia Independence Council. I was selected as General Secretary of North Eurasian Solidarity Alliance. It's a union of 4 nations: Ingushetia, Kalmyk, Yakutia, and Buryat. So people from these nations have met in Washington. They have created independence committees and declared independence from Russia and issued decrees, and they are creating now their own armed forces to become the instruments of building future democratic states. So the topic of our meeting is contours and outline of European security. I would like to now clarify those who are there behind the curtain, not outside, but internally, an internal perimeter. Let me explain why this point of view. Because currently, Ukraine has destroyed several main myths about Russia, about the second strongest world army, the territorial integrity of Russia. When Kursk region was intervened
where Russia who promised to use any weapon, like a nuclear weapon, but didn't do it. And thirdly, the myth of the Black Sea Fleet, which is no longer so. But the main myth, which is still not being busted, is that Russia has a future. In fact, there is no such future, and the lack of this future makes Russia completely free in what they do. They are not just like in 1970s. They went completely crazy with the ideas of communism, and now in 1991 they calmed down a little bit, but then Russian dominance myth has started. So ideas of ISIS, ideas of Russian world, it's the same thing: expansion and conquest. What Ukraine has been talking about for many years was largely ignored by Russia and Europe. Before Surkov and Volodin actually said this. They said that Russia doesn't have borders and they will expand as far as they can. So the one weak spot of Russia is its colonial and imperial character.
Russia has three allies in the civilized world, and thanks to these alliances, they function. They are the Russian chauvinism, the Russian Nazism, and also the purely imperialistic, the purely economically ungrounded idea of the Russian world. The older generation, whose representatives I can see here, they remember the attitude of Russians quite well. When at the daily level, a representative of every nationality knew where they belonged. And these attitudes built by the Soviet Union are ruined. There are us and them, and stopping Russians, of course, is something that makes no sense, because Russia is making this suicidal step, and it's impossible to stop it. Igor Chernov was mentioning Bush, who tried to stop this, but Yeltsin did not come here and did not try to stop the collapse, because they wanted to destroy that state. And the same thing is happening here and now. The Russian state is weaker on the inside than on the outside. You can recall Prigozhin's rebellion. I can recall the panic in the West and the Kadyrov troops who were unstoppable for 4 days. And as I have connections with the different nations in Russia, I remember how the governors of different Russian regions were not able to be identified. They were in hospitals, etc. And right now they have established the so-called Russian Association, kind of Hitlerjugend, that are provoking and attacking those who are not Russian. They are doing a good thing. So we don't need any help in this, but there are also nations that are controlled by Russians as part of the feudal government. They had no chance of building the separate state. They did not have the statehood ideology. The first representatives of intellectuals among them only started to emerge after 1917, and right now these nations, maybe for the first time in their history, are thinking that it's no good to continue working with Russians in the future. And it's not me, it's them who are saying that this cannot be continued like this, because this war is destroying the resources of those nations, including the natural resources. For instance, Yakutia owes billions of rubles to Russia, the territory that is robbed of its natural resources all the time, but it still owes Russia money. Also, the small nations of Russia are not satisfied with losing their people. We all understand that they are coming here for money, but this is a situation that is only acceptable to Russians, not acceptable to us. Russia is managing to seize the Ukrainian territories with the hands of those who are not Russians. And the smaller the numbers of locals, the better it is for the Russians. The more successful they are in exploring the natural resources. And for instance, in Buryatia, Russia bans the use of natural resources by the locals. So I believe that these rebellion efforts are totally realistic, and for them to happen there should be ideological, economical and political underpinning. It's not about the money, it's about the ideas, because the states are built on ideas. And we can see what can happen when the ideas are shaken. This is happening in the United States of America right now. This is why we would like to see those outlines of safety in the Golden Circle of Russia. And I would like to hear from France, from a well-known French journalist who would like to speak to us, and he needs 5 minutes to do this, and so right now we will kindly ask you to switch on his mic.
I will speak in English. It's okay for you? You listen me? It's okay?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, super. First of all, thank you for the invitation. I am very happy to participate in this conference. And I want to speak about the reaction of Europe now after the election of Trump. 1 month ago, Trump was elected, as you know, inauguration in Washington. And he started with some very aggressive declaration. He wants to take Canada, he wants to take Greenland, he wants to take Panama, and he wants to do a deal with Putin about Ukraine. For Europe, we know and we understand that the time of the period of the after Second World War is ending. Europe now is alone, and Europe must take and prepare its own defense. We can see now some axes, Trump, Putin, to divide Europe like it was in Yalta. Europe now is in danger because of those two presidents, Trump and Putin. Ukraine is for Europe the most important things for our destiny and our future. Europe must support Ukraine, and Europe will support Ukraine. You can see that in France, Emmanuel Macron, but also in England. We are planning a European defense, and also we are planning European help for Ukraine. But you have to understand that now Europe is alone, like Great Britain in 1940. We need to take in our hand our destiny. That means we need to integrate as soon as possible Ukraine in the EU. We need to help as soon as possible Ukraine with more weapons and more money. We have to force Germany to give Taurus missile. And we also have to take frozen money from Russian assets in Europe. We are thinking now to start an industrial plan for our weapon productions. We will do a big loan, European EU loan, EU budget around 800 billion euro only for armament and weapons. What we are facing now is the future of Europe as a free democratic country. We have no choice. We have to build our European defense community with Ukraine and with UK. We have to understand that NATO will be less and less efficient, and maybe tomorrow Washington, Trump will leave the organization. We have already all the law, all the treaties we need in the Treaty of Lisbon. With the Treaty of Lisbon, we can build a common defense, European common defense. We can start cooperation between different EU state members for European army and European defense. We are thinking, and that's France, we are thinking to protect Europe with our nuclear weapon. Because, as you know, France is the only country who is independent with its own nuclear weapon. UK has also a nuclear weapon, but those nuclear weapons depend also from US. And now in France, we are thinking how we can protect with our nuclear weapon all the European continent. We have no choice, because if we don't face and don't take our destiny in our hands, Europe will collapse and democracy will collapse. Europe now is the only continent when you can speak about democracy, and Ukraine is the first country who are fighting for this. And that's why we now need this European defense with Ukraine. We need European cooperation. We need a European army. And now in Europe, and you can see on internet, on YouTube, a lot of European citizens understand, at least, that took 3 years to understand that Russia was a threat for Europe. But now we understand in Europe that we have to face Russia imperialism, and we are alone because we cannot trust Trump, because Trump wants to deal with Putin. That's my conclusion. Thank you.
Щиро дякуємо, пане Олів'є.
Thank you, Olivier.
I'd like to continue on the French topic and pass the floor to Mikhailo Milnik. He was the military attaché in France. He knows Europe all too well. Yeah, I would like to add you know that back in the day, somewhere 1999, 2003, but before, I would like to add in the context of European security, our colleagues, who's ambassador to Croatia and the Croatian veteran who is here with us. At some time, in 1998-97, I participated in the peacekeeping mission in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and it was under the auspices of French division Salamander, where German and Italian brigade was part of it, the Spanish brigade was part of it, and never before, because I was born in Donbass in Ukraine, next to Lysychansk. Everybody, the whole world knows this place now is Kreminna and Rubizhna. I never thought that this land will be so destroyed as I saw in Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Balkans. So that's why, honestly, it's been 25 years now, and we still did not manage to retain the peace as it is now threatened by aggressive politics of Russian Federation. So the understanding of the whole world, and the whole world has become cognizant of this threat from our northern neighbor, and the whole world now is on the brink of the Third World War. So I think we need to use all the experience that we've acquired during the peacekeeping missions in the Balkans, in other parts of our planet where conflicts, in the conflicts directly or indirectly, Russian Federation is an actor. So that's why today, when I headed the Veterans Intelligence Veterans Union, I think veterans have to join in the process of resolving these problems, and only the joint work, the joint efforts with our colleagues with Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. So you understand, well, we have okay relations with Serbian, but we are more actively working with those veterans who actually were together with us. So the joint efforts of active duty military, of the diplomats, of the civil society organizations, including the veterans, need to do everything that multi-contours of European security should go not across Europe but across Russian Federation. Thank you so much, and let's have a great cooperation between veterans. As the French say, we're at your service. Thank you. I think it's time to give floor to our guest from Croatia. Madam Ambassador?
I'm sorry, I was not prepared to talk.
Я перепрошую, я не готувалася.
Organizing this meeting. It is a very important meeting, and thank you as well for your so rightly said words about what has happened in Croatia. We say it was 34 years ago when the war started, And now, after 34 years, we still face a narrative from our neighbors which disagree totally with what has happened in Croatia. So when I faced this, it was in Dubrovnik last year, as your president paid a visit, and we organized a meeting of between Ukraine and Southeastern Europe. And these words were said by the Serbian president, that they totally disagree with what our prime minister said. It was aggression, etc. So I immediately thought, oh, after 34 years, we have to face this. What will happen with Ukraine? And at this moment, I understood that it is up to us, diplomats who I personally spend all the time here during the war, to give a testimony. What really happened, and the truth is the only way to find a just solution. Thank you so much.
Дякуємо, пані посол. Я думаю, Желько Гранатір, як ветеран.
Thank you. And our great Croatian veteran. Hello, and thank you for your words. Just a couple of words. From the very first day when this war started, and I was serving on Danube, on the border of Serbia, and it was the start of 1991. So today we see that everything that Russia, considering Russia has organized our Yugoslavian war. Why? Because Russia had the idea to test how things can work out, which is not in their territory. So for the first time, we saw this concentration camps, occupation of our villages and then cities, the attempts to use violence to control the situation and to see how people are capable to withstand this terror and violence. And so these very first years of the war were very difficult. So it's a short version. I will live now in Ukraine, and since the first day of the war in Ukraine, unfortunately, I live in Stoyanka, and we met this war. We received some interesting experience. So we, as people who stayed behind, who did not go in the first days where this aggression started, and I was one of those who, inside our village, organized the first block post. There were no armed forces yet, and we couldn't expect for assistance. And we were the first. And we were looking at the European bridge where Russians reached, and then it was exploded later.
This is why those who were staying were actually people who decided to stay. They had the understanding that they needed to protect their land. And unfortunately, as I'm looking at Europe right now, when the war started in our countries, we looked at the United States and Europe, and from the US we got the kind of peace that was not fully in our favor. And also in Europe there were their own political interests, and they only paid attention to our war after they saw that we actually could resist. And we only became interesting for the Central and Eastern Europe. That's where we got the bulk of our support from. And right now, Ukraine is in a similar situation. We are looking up to the United States, but I believe the experience we had back then, we were a country that received much less interest, and in this current situation, Ukraine needs to be very careful about the support it receives from the United States of America, as well as to support received from Western Europe. Why so? Because there are personal interests involved, and these personal interests can push them to seeking the resolution of the conflict faster. In our case, we managed to overcome the war. We maybe were helped by the fact that Croatia was a smaller country, and in this case there was a much higher readiness to get united, to build the army consisting of professionals and volunteers. Unfortunately, it had to continue for 5 years, and only on the 6th year we got our victory and kept our territories. Right now, Ukraine is following a similar path, and I have recently been to a Croatian event where we discussed Ukraine and the third anniversary of the war, and we discussed that Ukraine will not have an easy time because of the sincerity of Ukraine's friends is right now experiencing a trial. It's not an easy situation, and I truly hope that Europe will have this desire to get united in the name of its own protection. There is no other solution than to get united within the European Union. As we can see from the latest actions taken by the United States and Russia, we have to only rely on ourselves. Otherwise, they will be testing the new approaches and new opportunities and new weapons on us. We all can see these things happening, and this is why we hope the situation with Ukraine will help Europe get united and build the defense forces that we lack at this point. And I wish you for this situation to be over as fast as possible, and I wish Ukraine peace, and I wish Ukraine to keep all its territories and have the strong relations with the friends, the numerous friends of Ukraine. Though for now we cannot clearly see the solution of the situation. And can we hear from Taras Zagorodny? Yeah, and also Vadim Skibitsky, you can get ready, and after that we will have a free order. You will just have to raise your hand before you speak. So let us do this way. Americans were mentioned right now, and I'm recalling the words of Churchill, who said that Americans would always choose the correct thing after they try everything else. So when Trump is being criticized right now, actually, we tend to forget that Biden had a similar policy of friendship with Russia. People were just paying much less attention to this. They actually were helping the Russian Empire from hunger. They were helping Bolsheviks. They were providing technologies. Good news is that Americans failed to keep the Soviet Union, which means they are not always successful. And right now, they are choosing the natural path of destroying the Euro-Atlantic unity in exchange for this pseudo-union with the Russian Federation. However, it's not as simple as it may seem, and as we can see, this demonstration of power is not as strong as it was supposed to be. It's not enough to address the issue of the peace deal. It's not enough to win the trade war against the China, and the tricks with interrupting weapons supply to Ukraine only raised issues in Europe. Why do we need these American weapons at all? Because previously the American weapons were supplied together with predictable American policy. If we don't have the predictable American policy, why do we need these expensive pieces of equipment from the US? And this, of course, raised lots of questions. In the American nation, the general opinion of the public is in support of Ukraine. The military industry is asking lots of questions in America. Recently, they have announced F-47, but who will be buying this? For those of you who are unaware, F-35 was an international project. People were contributing money, and well, if now U.S. is becoming an ally of Russia, will this F-35 be effective against Russia? We can now say that NATO basically does not exist anymore. Yes, there is this acronym, there is Mr. Rutte, but Norway does not believe in NATO anymore. Poland and Baltic countries, well, quite obviously, they don't believe in it. So at some point, the United States of America will have to come back to their Euro-Atlantic family after they have tried everything else, because well, China is also supporting Europe because they have their interests there. Basically, the United States wants to do the same thing as was happening with China in 1970. China was basically forced to fight against the Soviet Union. Because Americans told them, you want to prove that you are with us, you need to quarrel with the Soviet Union. Also, there were Russian troops on the Chinese border. It was very expensive. Right now, the trick is to do the opposite, to keep Russia and China away. However, China is well aware of this, and thus it's impossible to do this because the trade exchange both with China and with Europe is quite high in Russia, and the trade exchange with the US is much smaller. And so when China has all these resources, it will do what it wants to do. And all of these fairy tales of Russians being willing to give the Arctics to the Americans, actually after the situation with Exxon, there is not many of those willing to work with Roscosmos. Musk does not need Roscosmos anymore. They have cheaper alternatives. And we need to understand that in real life, Russia has nothing to give to the United States, and the United States have nothing to give to Russia. They cannot force Ukraine to give away the 4 regions to Russia. They cannot even sign these vague agreements on the natural resources. And our security is in fact only guaranteed by our weapons. In this case, no one can tell us what to do with our weapons. And by the way, today the Russian transport system was disrupted, and well, this is against the American business. So why do Russians are unwilling to attack the energy infrastructure? Well, that's because the oil and gas complex is malfunctioning. 80% of Russia's trade exchanges happening through the ports of the Baltic countries and Novorossiysk. The only successful sanctions against Russia are the Russian strikes, and this is why the Americans are worried and they are trying to save Russia. Why so? Because they want to address 2 things that are impossible to address at the same time. Right now, the Americans are creating the artificial economic crisis for the relaunch of its economy through the tariffs, through the exchange, etc. And these automatically entail the drop of the oil prices. As you can recall, in the COVID-19 times, there was a point in which the prices of oil were negative. But Russia wants to see high oil prices. So what's the difference between the Biden and Trump administrations? Biden needed the Russian oil. This is why there were some opportunities for them to keep selling. But with Trump, this doesn't work. They have their own guys in Texas who wants to work with oil and gas. And this is why this puzzle is just not being put together. I can compare this to the DNA of a human who, well, a human and a chimpanzee have a 98% similarity between their DNA, but these 2%, for some reason, that's a crucial difference. And in the same way, it's happening here. So, for instance, in the Black Sea, the Russians are speaking of the free ship trade on the sea, but can the United States ensure this? No, they cannot. They can only use the sea for a limited time. And this is why. The main pressure is happening through misinformation. I am sure that there are many people in Trump administration who are noticing that they are overdoing what they do, and what if Europe finally decides to to strengthen its defense systems? What if they produce the missiles that are more effective than those from the United States of America? NATO at the same time becomes fragmented, just as well, the European Union. All is risk focused, and this is the new kind of NATO that we can see. So the Poland, Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria, and Northern Europe, that's a new kind of union that can be more autonomous and self-dependent compared to Western Europe, because Norway is the only country that has some free money right now, and actually they have 100 kilometers of the land border with Russia. For some reason, the opinion of the public on NATO accession is now different. So there are opportunities for cooperation in terms of militech, and also, as far as we can see, the new system that is being built in Europe, it's given some chance to Ukraine. The security control should be happening from here. We, of course, don't want to have everything to be managed from Germany, because in this case Ukraine would become a battlefield. Even Article 5 is not speaking of territorial integrity. It only says about restoring security. So we need to understand the risks. We need to understand that guarantees are only given to countries who are strong without guarantees. It's just like with the bank. If you want to get a loan, you need to persuade the bank that you basically don't need the loan. Only then you will get it. And just like Israel, when it was attacked by Iran, so many people were saying, look, they are protecting Israel so much, but in fact they were protecting Iran, because they understand that this would be a direct impact on the oil prices. And so the militech, electronics, etc. This should be the Ukrainian national idea. As Timothy Snyder has famously written, Ukraine and Poland has been a part of those bloody lands. Eastern Europe was seen as no one's land, and the Germans, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire were using these lands to settle their business with the Russian Empire. And so we need to be autonomous and strong in weapon production as much as possible, and we need to look for common grounds with those with whom we share some fears, just like Sweden. So if they are using American engines in their military equipment, let us offer them Ukrainian engines. And there are numerous examples of this kind. That's how I see the situation. And speaking of Americans, they do not have any objective reasons to behave like this. I do not exclude the corruption reasons and someone's vested interests involved in this, and but there can be some Ukrainian trace. So they wanted to address this situation quickly, and when they failed, they started speaking of Ukraine's need to change its constitution, etc., etc. So, quite understandably, it is not as simple as they want it to be. We need to understand that in this war, we need to find a point of balance between the US and Europe, because the situation may change, but the war in Ukraine is the consequence of Germany colluding with Russia, because they were destroying the sovereignty of Central and Eastern Europe, selling their gas, they're destroying the nuclear power industry, and that's because Germany and Russia had their shared interests. We always need to keep this in mind. It's neither good nor bad. This is some basic understanding that we can see right now. Thank you so much, Taras. Yes, indeed, there is no such thing as friends or foes forever in politics. There are only interests.
Передамо слово війську.
So, well then, let the military talk. So, then followed by Sergei Chernov. Right, thank you, colleagues. Thank you for the invitation. It's a relevant topic. New contours of European security. So, starting from EU experience in NATO, we've been on the way to NATO and learning from the experience. I've been head of the analytical block. 3 times we were learning experience. We were even learning how to organize the fire hydrants in NATO countries. But I would reformat it, and I would talk about it in a new way. The new, old contours of European security. Our French colleague mentioned Lisbon Treaty. Remember what it was? It was European forces of rapid deployment, then rapid response, then their own system with reconnaissance, regardless of they're independent of NATO. And let's see what happened. At that time, European Union had an ambition of political leaders. We know who basically ended in nothing. NATO has been the pivot of European Euro-Atlantic security and remain. The next question, it was an ambition, but there was no threat. The old documents in the EU, in NATO as an organization, didn't start in 2019 when they were openly in their documents writing that one of the main threats, military threats, is Russian Federation. So that was basically started with the Europe, Baltic states, so Poland, who faced the threat of a possible, they didn't call it war, it was a competition. So as it all started, the armed aggression started, the large-scale armed aggression, because the aggression against our state lasts from the hybrid threats, all of that has been before. So how very cognizant of the new approaches.
По суті, вона не оцінена. Я приведу просто слова колишнього міністра оборони Сполучених Штатів Америки Остіна, який ці слова сказав.
I remember the words of Lloyd Austin, who said it on the second meeting within the Ramstein format.
Це на той час було
At the time,
було вже зрозуміло, що
it was already clear that Russian Federation did not achieve the strategic objectives that they set in the first days of war, but in Europe received the clear signals where they should be moving. Those are the signals from the US, regardless of whether Democrats or Republican were sending those signals. So the three issues were mentioned. Very simple.
ви здобули,
What have you achieved and why and how should you go about it? First, you got rid of all the Soviet and Russian arms, because everything that was in Europe, especially in Eastern Europe, was given to Ukraine.
Друге питання. Ви перейшли, особливо знову ж таки, нові члени НАТО, на стандарти НАТО. Тому що боєприпас залишився натовський,
Standards on NATO, because the ammunition is from NATO, artillery system is with NATO, air defense in most countries is NATO, and most of the rest.
Ми почали реально покращувати нашу оперативну сумісність. Тому що стандарт НАТО, він передбачає, що система управління одна,
Standard NATO means unified standards.
збройної боротьби. І знову ж таки, вже в подальшому, четверте питання, яке було порушено. Розвиток оборонно-промислового комплексу Європи.
So the development of defense industry complex in Europe.
Швидко, тому що Європа, стара Європа, вона після розвалу Радянського Союзу, після закінчення
So Europe, after this dissolution of the USSR, after the end of Cold War,
спокійно, не замислюючись над тим, що буде в подальшому. Не те, що там було на складах, на арсеналах, все, що залишилося. По суті, воно не придатне.
so what was in the warehouses, it was not usable in the battle, because
Міністерство оборони проводили інспекції скрізь, в тій же самій Італії, в всіх партнерах, і ми бачимо, і знаємо, в якому стані те озброєння, яке залишилося після Холодної війни, постоявши на складах, арсеналах більше 30 років.
so after the Cold War, more than 30 years, the ammunition was lying in warehouses. It's not worth anything. So these were the four messages that the US said.
До Європи стосовно розвитку своїх оборонних спроможностей і розбудови своєї системи безпеки в рамках, відповідно, євроатлантичної інтеграції.
So that was the message within European integration.
Це логічне продовження. Наскільки це буде довго, це вже інше питання. Але, знову ж таки, переходжу тепер з більш практичної сторони. І тут буду посилатися тепер до сучасних політиків. Перше. Російська Федерація чітко усвідомлює своє місце і роль.
Russian Federation understands their mission and role in the modern world.
2026-2035 з перспективи до 2045 року.
So, since 1945, they understood what is their place in this global system, global leadership.
Перше, це абсолютне лідерство Сполучених Штатів Америки.
Absolute leadership of the USSR. Second scenario is the growing role of China. Third is multipolar world, where Russia also sees itself as part of it. And the fourth is regionalization, regions. So regions, as we discussed now,
Дивіться, як зараз колективно працюють країни Балтії, країни Північної Європи, включаючи Данію, стосовно своєї безпеки. Я далі зупинюся.
so Baltic states. So these are the four scenarios. And when we were saying that Russian Federation in these documents is clearly stated that the Ukrainian question should be completed till 2026.
Вони ґрунтуються на тим,
They are grounded on those scenario analysis and those predictions. Because if the war will continue for 5 and 10 years, Russia will never be able to catch up and be on the same level as the US and China. They forever will remain the regional player on
скажімо, східноєвропейському рівні. І це чітко Російська Федерація на сьогоднішній день усвідомлює. Через те й передбачає в подальшому. Вони розробили класичний підхід.
So that's a classic approach to defense planning.
Міністерство відомства і решти всіх науково-дослідних інституцій, як Міністерство оборони Російської Федерації, безпосередньо центральних органів влади, тому що вони спрогнозували...
So they have forecast that till 1945 the 15 scenarios of military conflicts.
6, які пов'язані з Північною Європою. І коли ми говоримо, а чому Європа, от зараз говорять, давайте нові контури безпеки, тому що Північна Європа розуміє країни Балтії.
Not Europe understands this, Baltic states understand, the Poland understands this. There were only 4 potential military conflict scenarios for Poland.
Що це загроза, безпосередня загроза. І давайте повернемося. Вчора Сікорський, міністр закордонних справ, чітко сказав, Російська Федерація, якщо буде врегульована...
The Russian Federation, if the conflict will be regulated between Ukraine and Russia, till 2030, Russia will be able to again wage war. So again, Sikorsky, it's not that I like Sikorsky, but it's the Minister of Foreign Affairs of our neighbor countries, which is now a hub.
Забезпечення України. Влітку минулого року він теж дуже прекрасну заяву сказав. Він сказав дуже просто. Якщо Україна програє і буде окупована Російською Федерацією, то 500 тисяч Збройних сил України разом з росіянами...
500,000 armed forces of Ukraine, but Russia will fight against Poland.
Я просто приведу вам приклад, що на сьогоднішній день Російська Федерація виконує план по рекрутуванню, по заключенню контрактів на проходження...
So the plans to recruit the Ukrainians in Russian Federation, minimum of 100,000, 115% in the first 3 months.
110, 115, у них немає проблеми.
They didn't have problems of forcing people to go to war.
Це зрозуміло. І тепер стосовно
Russian, I mean.
регіональних форматів.
So there are many regional formats.
Диссертаційному дослідженню, як кандидат політичних наук,
I am in science, but so I was looking into the Visegrad group.
А ми не можемо без наших партнерів.
We can't do it without our partners. We can't facilitate all of our needs.
Через те багато хто, і я підтримую
So that's why
французького колеги,
I support the words of our French colleague. Everybody's looking at Ukraine, at our armed forces, at our capabilities, at our experience,
спроможності, можливо, не
at the capabilities of not the entire defense industry complex, but those industries that are massively developing the new innovative means of warfare. So FPV drones, electronic warfare, tactical electronic warfare, other things like reconnaissance, because they are one of the most powerful in the world. And it's true, because that has been tested and improved in the battle situation. For partners, I'm saying it's not the battle against some hiding civilians. It's about regular army, a nuclear state. So that's why our partners are so interested in Ukraine. But a very simple question that we face. We have to use this opportunity, because there will be a time in a year or 2 or 3, unless they change their point of view or forget what are the prospects of integrating Ukraine in the security system of Europe. And not only for us, it's for them as well. Those who understand this, they support us quite actively. There are a lot of programs now. I'm not going to repeat, you all know them. Those initiatives that are now discussed in the EU regarding the European Security Bank, the billions of euro that they are planning to allocate for their own armed forces. And this is, our perspective is very simple. Joint ventures, joint approaches for security and defense. As for the US and Europe, so the US and Europe will somehow figure it out. Elections there, elections here, and well, every administration tried to pacify Russia. Obama and the Biden. I was in the previous conference just recently. 5 times, minimum 5 times, after the Second World War, the U.S. tried to somehow make friends, make amends with Russian Federation. But historically, the things repeat. So our colleagues just said that in 1917s, well, let's remember Ukrainian People's Republic. 100 years ago, what was there? Who supported us from Europe? Nothing new. The U.S. didn't support us. Yeah, it's a lively discussion. We need it because the time is now. Sooner or later, we have to think, what do we do next? How do we build our foreign policy? We as a military intelligence, we need to support that because the main objective remains. It's foreign military threat for Ukraine. And what Sikorsky said, that till 2030, Russian Federation will be again capable of restoring, so waging war again. Occupied territory remains occupied territory. And the military presence, we remember the Black Sea Fleet and how it all started. It started with Crimea, where there's military presence of Russian Federation. Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, there will be later questions. We have a colleague from Belarus on Zoom. It's one of the countries that are important. Founder of White Legion. So greetings. I understand that Belarusian and Ukrainian are close, but I will speak Russian because we have ghosts. We have guests here to speak. So let me share a situation that is not on the surface. Russia, after they adopted their concept, so the concept of restoration of the USSR back in the 96, Lukashenko, back then he was still legitimate, he signed a union agreement with Russia. Since that moment, the preparation started of the Crimean scenario. So Russia has been destroying, with Lukashenko's hands, the entire Belarusian national culture and education and the media.
So it was happening for 30 years. It was a kind of preparation of Belarus for sale, so to speak. But from the outset, Lukashenko had the understanding that he will somehow will manage to avoid the fate of the occupied Belarus. And since the onset of 2000s, there was a tacit agreement between the modern government of Belarus that has lost its legitimacy and the nationally conscious people, according to whom it was better to live under the Belarusian flag than under the Russian flag. This continued until 2020, which disrupted the situation considerably. Before that, there was 3 narratives in Belarus. About 30 to 35% followed the national narrative. There were those who were pro-USSR, those who supported Lukashenko, and for them, Belarus was their motherland, and between 5 and 7% were people supporting the Russian world. What happened in 2020? Russia used this situation to its benefit. With the hands of Belarusian Ministry of Interior, they started the repressions which continue till this day, and according to different data, Belarus has been left by threats and other types of actions by about 2 million people. The modest estimates are around 700,000 or 800,000, but 2 million seems more realistic because there is not many people left to work in Belarus. So right now in Belarus we mainly have the followers of the Soviet Belarus and the Russian world. The national narrative followers are mainly outside Belarus at this point. I don't know why Lukashenko had these hopes, but last week, during his visit to Moscow, Putin has openly stated the need to establish a United States. Lukashenko has spoken to journalists saying that no, we will not establish this United States, but his opinion, I think, doesn't matter at this point. And also, as of today, Belarus is ready for saying goodbye to Lukashenko. There are different groups in Belarus. There are different factions that are establishing their own militant groups, and there is Mr. Karpenkov who established 13 units all around Belarus based on the former special forces. It is an openly assault system. It's not about law enforcement. At the same time, the National Security Committee of Belarus for about 2 years has been busy installing its people as deputy directors, deputy CEOs in all the major government institutions. So we don't know what the outcome of this may be. This may be just a preparation for privatization after Lukashenko, or so there is some technical interruption. So I was speaking about the KGB in Belarus splitting into the two big sections, so those who are local and those who studied at the FSB Academy in Russia and signed their documents there. So there is a preparation to some kind of split in these structures. And if we look into anything autonomous in Belarus. For instance, the Department of the Security is also becoming a unit under the Ministry of Defense. So it's a preparation for dividing the Belarusian state once Lukashenko leaves. Currently, at this point, I am the head of a paramilitary structure in Europe, Belarusian Посполите Rushenie, and we are getting ready to save Belarus from the hands of Russia, but for this to happen, we need support from the outside. Seeing all the multitude of these paramilitary structures in Belarus, it's important for us to have the representatives of this narrative who are also sympathizing with Ukraine. And since 2014, I lived in Ukraine, and I do understand how close we are. So I'm hoping for your understanding that only external support and paramilitary units similar to our organization are the only things that will be able to address the situation in Belarus once Lukashenko finishes his power. So one other option is to have someone installed by Moscow, someone who does not have electoral support. Actually, Russia was always tracking the electoral ratings, and when Lukashenko was dropping below a certain threshold, they understood that it was unsafe. So if they install someone who is even less popular than him, they will have to enhance violence, and in this case, hopefully, Belarus will be able to demonstrate its national resistance, just like they did in 2020. However, back then, the neighbors from the east, without any open claims, were supporting the Russian agenda in Belarus. So that's what the situation is, and if we don't want to have Russian troops in Grodno and Brest threatening Ukraine from the north, let us think together how we can save Belarus from the hands of Russia. Thank you so much, Sergei. And right now, I would like to give the floor to Pavlo Chernerenko and Sergei Chernobrod and Sergei Pasechnik. I would like to come back to our topic, but before that, a couple of remarks that I'd like to share. I am not specializing in warfare, and as I look at the Russo-Ukrainian war from the standpoint of knowledge and skills that I have, from the standpoint of international law and non-governmental organizations and the national liberation movements in Russia, I understand that a great pity is that the government of Ukraine is not paying enough attention to the military and to the political component of the resolution of this war. Hence, we have resources that are underused. We were speaking here of the dismantling of Russia or the collapse of Russia. I believe the terminology here is not necessarily accurate because those who are presenting these ideas to the West, they are facing with a negative attitude. And if we present the same goal but addressed into an entirely legal form of decolonization, that's an entirely different thing. We have the international instruments granting independence to colonized nations, and this was seen at work in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America. When this becomes the foundation, the effect is entirely different. There was a resolution of the European Parliament on decolonization. There was a resolution by the Parliament Assembly of the OSCE. So when we are speaking of decolonization, Ukraine could, and I believe should, play a very important role of a hub for the national movements of the colonized nations of Russia. We can see for the last 2 years, and there is the shared understanding among our officials, yes, there is a need to decolonize Russia. However, right now, we have a draft law on the foundations of Ukrainian policy concerning the colonized nations of the Russian Federation. I took part in the working group contributing to this draft law. It was developed a year ago, registered in July 2024, approved by the main factions of the parliament. I also took part in this process, and after that it's been idle for almost a year. We don't have enough time to delve into the details, and surely the draft law is not addressing all the issues, but as we can see from the very name of it, from the understanding of the importance of this, understanding that Ukraine should be not purely a hub, but a platform for supporting these movements, providing the information support and administrative support, and helping establish connections with other countries, and also making sure that the other countries of Europe also establish the patronage over the specific nations of the Russian Federation. These will greatly decrease the threat of radical Islamization of these nations, or having some strong Chinese influence in them. And in this regard, it's very important to keep in mind the steps that the parliament could take. So there is a draft law on the protection agency. This could be a way to work with the Russian opposition in Europe, but the persons who do not want to be in the armed forces of Ukraine, they do not want to get money from the Ukrainian nation, because from the Ukrainian government, because they are patriots of Russia, but they could be a part of a private military campaign. So what I'm saying here is not quite pleasant to hear, but we are basically underusing our legislative resources. And looking at other examples, let's consider the Kursk operation. After, before that, we had the operation in Belgorodska Oblast with RDK, etc. And my question is why? Why we only had Russians in the Belgorod operation, and then in the Kursk operation, which was well prepared and armed, why didn't we have Russians there? if RDK and the Free Russia Legion and the Siberian Legion were marching in the front, this would be liberation of Russia rather than the occupation of Russia. This would be liberation administrators. We have disconnected the detonator from the dynamite, and this is just one example. I am saying this from the standpoint of someone who is not having a military background. I'm speaking from the political and strategic standpoint, and I believe it was a mistake. And speaking of the European security, we first need to answer the question, why do we need the new structures? Is this because the old ones do not work? Yes, but what were the old ones? These were the organizations established after World War II. This was the UN and NATO. And it turned out that UN was a meaningless organization, not only because the Russian influence and their veto right. Why did we even see Russia there? Well, that's because Germany was defeated in the course of World War II, but their ally with whom they started that war, the Soviet Union, was not defeated, and it kept all its goals. And the United Nations organization did not have any specific criteria for a nation to be included. It was based on the assumption that all the countries were striving for peace, but in fact some countries are aggressive, such countries as Russia or North Korea or Iran, and knowing all this, we need to approach a new security architecture. And why doesn't NATO work? Well, for the same reason that the first Polish Republic did not have a functional parliament. One person could raise their hand and they would use their veto right, and it didn't work. So let me conclude. I believe that this new European structure of security should not be purely European. The geographical principle is failing here. There is Japan, that is purely a democratic country, and there is Viktor Orban, who is in Europe. So in the beginning, this should be some kind of a European UN or European Security Organization, but it should only accept democratic countries and countries working towards democracy. And once it ascends to the global level, there should be no Security Council. It should only be based on the Article 5 principle. And finally, well, let me assume that in this organization there should also be an internal component. Attack on a citizen, unconstitutional, illegal attack against the human rights. It's also an attack on everyone, because things always start from the inside, like they did in Belarus. Thank you, Pavlo. And Mr. Chernov, who has recently arrived from Kharkiv, can share the situation on what is happening there right now and what we can do with this. Thank you so much. I am grateful for the opportunity to speak in such a format and share my opinions on the challenges we currently have at the regional level. Using the example of our Kharkiv diplomatic club, which consists of 18 honorary consulates from north to the south, I would like to speak on the aspect of the information war. I believe it is important because I will now express my opinion, and I will kindly ask my colleagues to support this from me, but maybe they will confirm that I'm right.
We have to change our approach in how we assess and evaluate this war. My opinion is that we, as a Ukrainian nation, as Ukraine, we have won this war in March 2022 when we managed to retain our statehood, our sovereignty, in actually standing against the nuclear power. Everything else is the price of that victory. So that message must be heard in northern, eastern, and southern regions where there is brutal warfare going on. For people in the civilians to understand that the vibe is different. In 2022 is one thing, and now it's different. So the spirit of a winning nation, or God forbid, as now the enemy warfare, enemy psyop is trying to disseminate a different ideology. So it's a very vulnerable factor, a dangerous factor. We, of course, are witnesses that the world is transforming from geopolitics going into geoeconomics. But they are very interconnected things, because economic war is also getting more active. And it's good that Europe is cognizant of that. But as always, they're very slow to understand. And this is where we should be more active, not only on the state level, on the regional level, on people's diplomacy, simple citizens, like lobbying in the best sense of this word, to support those countries and their leadership, who are now actually leaders in supporting Ukraine, and those who step by step take responsibility for the content, but again very slow, because they also need to be founded in something. We know it's coming back to information, because if the people don't support the leadership, it's hard for the leadership to take any sharp decisions, because they are balancing between their population, the elections, and the external aggressor. Secondly, of course, during the Euro integration efforts, we want the role of Ukraine now, not when we are integrated in Europe, but now. The role of Ukraine is perceived and seen and heard in all the economic issues of EU and defense, and it's very important because even now we need to push, we need to give some understanding to them. Even if they allocate 1%, what the Western countries are now discussing, or redistribute the social programs to boost the defense capabilities, that's a lot of money. But everyone has to do that. All the countries have to do that. And understanding and communicating the relevant information which we have in Ukraine. And every day we should do that. The nations have to do that to understand what it's about. Diplomats, official circles, unofficial circles, everyone. Thirdly, of course, every time that we can hear in the American establishments or in Europe, and I'm talking about economy again, the economy responds, the stock markets respond. And I was traveling on the train, I saw how the stock markets responded in Europe. In Germany and Iceland, 10 to 16%. And in the US, it's minus. It's a negative development. In Europe, it's positive development. In the US, it's negative. And it's another factor of stability, of foreign policy, of their impact on those countries, on their economies directly. And we need to study that factor. We need to use this because it's very important. And I would like to also mention that the ministries of foreign affairs, and I know that when I speak to honorary consuls, I've heard that we have to work with them. We have to coordinate with them. We have to communicate with them. So last week we had a deputy head of foreign affairs, Mr. Mishenko, who got the honorary consuls together and how important it was. He was explaining to them what the situation in Ukraine now and what the honorary consuls have to communicate to their countries. Some first-hand experience. And we had this meeting, but it has to be done all over, in all the regions, all the time, because the situation is very dynamic. Not everyone can have this kind of in-depth analysis at hand, like the military intelligence or political analysts who are professionally doing this. And so when you listen to information and psychological influence, it's hard to navigate this because people trust those guys and they can be the bridge of communicating to the population, to the residents. You have to keep communicating to them the messages that they will disseminate. So let me not take too much of your time. It's a discussion and we all have our proposals, but my main points, you have to multiply the work of communicating on different levels. Communication is key in exchanging opinion, information, and understanding that over there in the regions and communities, the citizens, the communities, and any consulates and honorary consuls, they have to be communicated, but they have to also understand their responsibility. They are part of this process and use the opportunities that they present. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we will try and organize these events more frequently on the most relevant topic. Today's topic, I think, is relevant enough. Okay, Vasily. Dear friends and colleagues, I'm Sergei Pasechnik, head of the National Center of Information Policy. I'm the General Major in Reserve. I've served in the Military Intelligence Department, worked with India and the US, worked as a consul, and I know too well the countries. I know the US not only as externally but internally. I know the deep state that is, well, almost invisible, but decisions are made with this regard. So let me start with Russia. Igor Chernev said that it would be great if Russia would disintegrate. I would say that it won't disintegrate on its own. If you know Russia, they have quite a strong potential, human potential, natural resources, etc. So my colleagues in the US, in Britain, they told me how the Soviet Union disseminated. It was not disintegrated by itself. There was an Anaconda plan, and their allies participated, NATO and other countries. And they made this disintegration inevitable. There is no such plan now. At least I don't see it, because there are no practical steps to implement it, to pressure Russia in such a way that it would disintegrate. The weakest point of Russia is now economy. Back then, the Soviet Union disintegrated because the economy was under pressure, the oil prices went down, etc., etc. And then the disintegration became inevitable. Sooner or later, and even now, if there was such plan of the countries who understand how dangerous is the nuclear state of Russia with their unpredictability and the hybrid warfare they're waging against other countries. And if there was such a plan, that would be, of course, contributing to the disintegration of Russia. And so the liberation movements, the national ethnic liberation movements of the smaller ethnicities who are now under colonial rule of Moscow. And of course, Ukraine, who is better than other countries, they know about the problems of those smaller nations. We could focus, we could have a center of support for such smaller ethnicities who are now under the Russian yoke and would like to break away from it. So that could be the impact, that could be influenced by information, by messaging. And Ukraine, understanding our experience of fighting Russian Federation, which is centuries long, starting from the Tsarist Russia, where Ukraine had to suffer the repression of Ukrainian language and literature, etc. And then, if you remember, after the First World War, the Soviet communists had the slogan, Europe is haunted by a ghost of communism. Now Europe has the perception of Russian aggression, starting from Great Britain, then to East Europe, Southern Europe. And we have to use that as an opportunity and unite those countries to understand it. It's understood everywhere, Norway, Romania, Croatia, because they've had first-hand experience of the horrors of the Balkan War. Now is the time for diplomats, for military diplomats, and if you talk about civil society organizations, unite those forces who understand the threat of Russian aggression, all levels. So positive and negative things. So understanding that, we work on configuration on the new defense union, who understands the threat of Russia and who would work out the countermeasures, political, economic, and military. So to facilitate sustainable peace and security, not only in Eastern Europe, Southern Europe, European continents. So we should work in this direction. As for the security of Ukraine, of course, the foundation of Ukraine's security for the long run, because disintegration of Russia is so it won't disintegrate in a year or three, so we should build our defense capability, because the adversary is not disappearing for a while, and the foundation of our security is armed forces, but armed forces that have modern weapons, so scientific potential of the state, because so it's a human potential, so restoration of military training in the schools and all the higher academia, the veterans movements with the Ministry of so like in Israel, the whole population is ready to serve in the army. So we should work out the proposals that would serve the building of our. Alexander Pritula, the ladies be to prepare. Okay, thank you. Thank you, dear colleagues. You know, we're talking, but I would agree with Sergei that Moscow will not disintegrate on its own, by its own. No matter how many documents we adopt, it can only disintegrate through our concrete actions. So you'll know from the press that the latest shellings of Kharkiv and Zaporizhia, they are using thermobaric charges, and it's a lot of environmental damage. Zaporizhia is environmentally unsafe to begin with. So I would like to add a short thing. I would agree, and thank you for having this round table. I agree with Sergei that we have to do it more frequently, and there will be a resolution from this round table as far as I understand. So first of all, how I see, because I was in Europe as a volunteer several times with the mission of people's diplomacy. And we don't use people's diplomacy to the whole extent, like horizontal connections. As a volunteer, as a person from humanitarian systems, we have the legal aspects of humanitarian systems, but they say, don't say that you were talking to politicians. Well, I managed to talk to Bogdan Borisevich. I managed to talk with Lech Walesa. They are very interested in knowing the situation from the inside. And I want to say that Europe requires our consultancy, our advisory, because there are no bomb shelters in Poland, in Slovak Republic. They are not ready for Russian missiles. What kind of security can you talk about in the modern warfare? So the very army psychology. I managed to talk to some military, like psychologically, for them the war is somewhere else. So I remember one of the Polish guys were calling us, I'm going to Ukraine. And and they say, take care of yourself. So for us, they still believe that the war is somewhere over there. It's not close by. So this people's diplomacy, I think we should put it in the resolution.
So we need to address the legal aspect, the so-called people's diplomacy. It is very important. And the farmers in Austin who have some personal connections, there are two both who are members of the Cossacks. They had a demonstration, and for those members of Cossacks, Ukraine is a holy thing, but not for others. And this is an element of the people's democracy. There are three issues that are very important in my opinion and have to do with the information war. Yes, I agree. We need to be strong in it, but for this, we need to have a strong ideology. So, the nation is weak when it's losing its ideology. We had the ideology of Cossacks. We could attack Moscow under Sahaydachny. We were strong under Marko Bezruchka. And these people are highly respected in Poland, and people in diaspora understand the problem. We knew back in 2016 that we will need this, and we made the proposal to have a street named in Austin after Marko Bezruchka. This was a person who made the independence of Polish possible. This was our Cossack from Tokmak. So people's diplomacy, that's one aspect. The next aspect is ideology. And we understand that a national idea such as the free will, the military power, the faith, these are very important elements. And actually, we heard here that weapons are a foundation. I would say the army is a foundation. This is a war for a long time, and over the last 100 years, for the last couple hundred years, we had 26 wars with Russia. We had a war once in 40 years. So I'm not even using the word Russia. I'm saying Moscovia. That's what other Kazakhs do. They have the following UNARMIA organization. They are working on their youth since they are 14 years old. They become snipers, they become explosive technicians, etc. And if it keeps going like this, we will have 300 to 350 well-prepared youngsters with those imperialistic ideas in their heads. And this is a very important thing, and we have a lot to share. I propose to establish some movement, and since we have here a representative of the main department of intelligence, maybe we could establish some training unit for kids so that they play and learn, and only Kazakhs can win. We have at least 2 Kazakhs who are present at this roundtable discussion, so I'm open for any dialogue, and thank you for your attention. Thank you, Alexander. As you are raising the issue of environment and other related issues resulting from the attacks in the east and in the south, let's hear from you, Nichuk. And thank you so much. This is a very important strategic roundtable discussion, but let me emphasize one more important aspect of the war, and unfortunately, Russians are using this area quite effectively. This is the area of ecocide, and unfortunately Europe and the US are not much interested in this. We can see this happening since 2013 when they came to Donetsk Oblast and they flooded the coal mines, and also the major companies such as Azot and Stirol, they were bombed, and all the chemicals made their way to the rivers. And I would say that people who suffered from the environment damage are 10 times more numerous than those directly impacted by the combat operations. According to UN conclusions, there is a 38% increase in the cancer incidence in the areas close to the combat lines. This has a very negative impact on people's health, and it creates negative conditions, forcing people to leave those areas. Some are leaving for Kiev and some for foreign countries. And also the Strategic Center for Environment Security, it actually started its operations 1 week prior to the full-scale invasion. It was then that the All-Ukrainian Association of Self-Government Authorities established this center, and it functioned under the Ministry of Defense, focusing on the environment security. I am grateful to the Space Agency and the Intelligence Department and the Global Policy Institute. We were working together since the very first day of the war to collect information about Chernobyl. You all know that the forest was on fire, and we had lots of information on the scope and level of radioactive pollution. I believe we did our best to collect the information to relieve the panic here in Ukraine and abroad in Europe, because unfortunately environment has no boundaries, and the rivers and the agriculture and other elements, they are interconnected. So if we look deeper into those issues, we have the need to have a roundtable discussion specifically focusing on environment safety. This should become a strategic component of European security, because this environment aspect is something that is missing in all of these important events. So we can see the military, economic, energy components, but for some reason environment issues are not in focus. And in the Vilnius summit, the environment issue was voiced, and it was decided to give us the equipment for measuring the radioactive pollution levels, and some equipment was provided for us to collect and analyze the different substances used by the Russians in this war. So we developed a brief proposal. It's systemic, and it has been developed by our team. If you support this, this could become the foundation for the next roundtable discussion, and we also could do it in a systemic way. The war in Ukraine not only changed the security architecture of Europe, but also caused new challenges, which require strategic solutions. And one of the underestimated areas is the environment damage. The scope of pollution and destruction of ecosystems, the threat of mine pollution has a direct impact on the environment of Ukraine and the European region at large. And we believe that environment security should become one of the fundamental elements such as defense, energy, and economic securities. The environment outcomes of war is a threat to all Europe. We could see unprecedented destruction of ecosystems. The explosion on the Kakhovka Dam, which caused a serious change in the ecosystem of Dnipro and Black Sea. The toxic waste from rocket attacks make Ukraine one of the most environmentally damaged countries. But that's not the full list of our problems. The circulations of heavy metals and other pollutants has impact on the neighboring countries and can have long-lasting consequences for the entire Europe. The joint strategy of environment security is a must for Europe because it will enable quick response to environment threats. We need to broaden the international monitoring of environment consequences of the war. We need to establish a joint system of environment monitoring here in Ukraine and in the neighboring countries. We need to develop a long-term program for the environment rehabilitation of the impacted territories with support of the EU, and finally invest into demining of the agricultural lands, which is a critical precondition for the agricultural security of Europe. This will enable the engagement of environment specialists, representatives of governments and business to develop a joint roadmap for the recovery of environment. For the future of Ukraine and Europe, we now have the chance to lay the foundation for reliable ecosystem for decades ahead. That's the proposal we have about the next round table. Alexander resides in Zaporizhia. He knows quite well about the dangers of nuclear power plants, and actually Kakhovka was one of the elements required for Zaporizhia NPP to function. So we have lots of information available. We have numbers, we have scientific contributions, and together we could raise these issues properly. So we kindly ask the main Department of Intelligence to join this effort. Thank you so much. We only have a couple of speakers left. They are Ilya Dushko, the officer of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, and Mr. Ivan Kunin. So, yes, please. Yes, Chaplain, Father Ivan Kunin. Yes, please. First and foremost, let me express gratitude for this wonderful roundtable discussion and the possibility for me to take part in it. I have lots of ideas, and I will be repeating some of the challenges raised by the previous speakers, some of the areas we need to work in, and very importantly, in my opinion, is to pay attention to the ideological issues that need to be strengthened in Ukraine, especially among the veterans. We need to engage them to active work and self-realization. It's important to address the perception of veterans as victims. They are not victims, they are consciously fighting for their values, for their families, for their dearest and nearest. And it's very important because sometimes they are perceived as victims who are fighting for God knows what, and they are actually fighting for something important. And unfortunately, the Russian information operations are to an extent effective. I was surprised to hear in some veterans communities that there is some negative perception of the conscription centers. Well, I tell them, you are at home right now for different reasons. You were injured, etc. But the other guys are still on the battlefield. There needs to be someone to replace them. So we can see this influence happening, and I don't know to which extent it is happening, because I haven't seen this much, but we need to strengthen these people's diplomacy, and I believe the veterans community can take an active part in this. There was this idea that I have voiced earlier in conversation with our veterans and also our active military who are thinking about their plans for vacation. There could be a possibility to cooperate with communities abroad. So they would have their vacation abroad. They would study the history and culture of some specific region of Europe, but at the same time they would be sharing some updates on what's happening in Ukraine, their experiences in the military or as veterans. And for regular Europeans, it would be a word that's more powerful than the words of politicians. This is something we surely could use. Also something that we didn't mention before, but we could see this in Eastern Europe and South Europe. There is a strong impact of Russians through religious organizations. Unfortunately, here in Ukraine, we are not as active as we could be, but abroad, Russians are facing no resistance when they work through religion and through other organizations associated with religion. In Poland, for instance, even in the Catholic organizations, we can find lots of pro-Russian propaganda, and even on these levels, we need to take care of diplomacy. We are looking for allies, but as we have discussed before, let me also share some conclusions from our meetings with the military. There are some close allies that understand us quite well. The Baltic countries, Poland, and other countries close to us, like Romania. I am not a diplomat. I cannot present the full picture on how to do this, but I believe we could work on the community levels, establishing this active communication, making sure they have some idea of what needs and should be done if necessary. Also, we can establish some military unions, like unions between Ukraine and Lithuania. This can work on the level of military forces, and we can start doing something. It's not against NATO standards or rules. And we could start from regional unions with the specific countries. They are interested in this, and we could benefit as well. And other countries in Europe or in other regions could start lobbying our interests and become more active in this. There is such need, and I know that these meetings of the Baltic and Black Sea regions were discussing these needs of such military, economic, and inter-community joint efforts. Unfortunately, as I hear from people, Russians are successful in Baltic countries in terms of their propaganda. Unfortunately, we are not active enough to try and block this. Russians are using the so-called truthful lies. This is something that's very difficult to find against, and in this regard, the so-called people's diplomacy is so important. Through the injured people who are staying there, through the veterans, through other people who are able to leave the country, we are able to witness. We are able to take an active part in the lives of those neighboring countries, while also being free from any influence, because those who reside there may face additional challenges. So these are some important aspects. Thank you so much for this roundtable discussion, and I wish you future success in the development of this movement. And now I would like to give the floor to Valery Yuzba from the Ukrainian Trade and Economy Mission. Hello, I am Valery Yuzba, and I am a professor of economy, and I have worked in Europe for about 20 years. I was the trade representative of Ukraine in the Benelux countries, in the UK, and in the United States of America. I would like to support Sergei's position, who spoke about Russians' special information operations. I'm grateful to the organizers, and having listened to a number of interesting presentations, I came to the conclusion that we are once again finding ourselves in the trap of being overly emotional and claiming we need to protect ourselves, etc. I would say there is no such thing as special information operations abroad. We are proposing certain things, and the first question we hear is, do you have money for this? If there is no money, it doesn't work. Sometimes people would do it on their own accord. They would have their vacation as military, and they would travel to places and participate in the events. Right now, I do not see any propaganda happening. If you reach any mass media that we have right now, if you read the news updates, they are terrible because there is so much of contradictory information, and this is information from our Ukrainian media. So I'm making a conclusion here that there is no clear, predictable, edited policy in terms of ideological support of the population. There is no such thing. And since I'm also engaged in rehabilitation of the military, I will give you an example. Feofania Hospital, we are seeing a woman who is in tears, and she says, I am from Zaporizhia, from the occupied territories of Ukraine. I am a primary school teacher, and our schools have already switched to the Russian language and the Russian curricula, and those who were teaching Ukrainian, even the principals, are now teaching Russian. So, speaking of the contours of Europe, speaking of the outcomes of this, I understand that Russia is starting to spread their misinformation, and we could hear this backfire through Witkov. They are saying, okay, they are Russian speakers, they are traditionally Russian, but can't we do something about this? We have to counteract somehow. And I do agree with my colleagues, we need to be supportive of this cause somehow. The Russian Empire will not collapse without our support. And we can see in the history that every revolution in Russia started from Petersburg or from Moscow. We need to understand that these are the places we need to work from, because the remote places in Russia are an entirely different thing, and we probably understand this quite well. As I look into every war has an economic component. But what about our current war with the Russian Federation? It's a colonial war. We all know this. The Russian Federation was the aggressor, and as many people have mentioned, we have won this war back in 2022, but we can as well lose it in 2025. And we have a colleague here who was the military attaché in Paris, and I was a trade representative in Brussels, Belgium, and you remember quite well the agreement on our NATO membership was ready for being signed, but it was not signed, and I can assure you it will not be signed, at least at this point, because our contours of European cooperation in the economic sense are also important. There was a trade war happening last year and the year before that. Why do we keep forgetting about this? Ukraine, with its approach to agriculture, is not a country of interest for Europe. We are being told about the phytosanitary requirements and other requirements. That's because the European Union agriculture is based on their government support. And looking at what's happening in the United States of America, we may recall Peter Thiel, which is a well-known author, and this is something that I am sharing with my students. Actually, he came up with the PayPal and other things. So when we are speaking of the techno-fascism, I do not see any deep analysis on our part. Yeah, we are saying different things about Trump, etc., but there is something behind that person, some economic underpinning, and this is quite interesting. That's the nature of money, and if we look at the U.S. government's national debt, we understand that there is some change in the nature of money. There is some change in the economic and technological system, and we are not thinking enough about this. We had a big number of international forums focusing on investments, focusing on other items, but right now we don't even have loans available. We don't even have resources for the defense industry. And I believe after each event of this kind, we need to do some analysis and based on them address the government, the president, making sure that we have some realistic approach to this world. Thank you so much. Yes, you can speak a bit later. So we now need to give the floor to a person on Zoom. Yeah, let's give him the floor.
Hello, I'm from Lithuania. So how it happens in Lithuania? I'm Ukrainian speaking now. This has been almost 4 years of large-scale invasion, but
I've been to Ukraine for 21 times with humanitarian cargo, so I speak Ukrainian already freely. So I'm trying to communicate this information to Lithuania, but here it's hard to communicate because, support. There's no support of Ukrainian government of working in Lithuania. I mean information support. We as activists in Lithuania, we are like in gray zone. They don't want to showcase us because they've been over this, and issues of security don't want to. One part of the government says there is some danger, but there is no danger. Second part of the government says there is no fifth column, there is no Russian collaborants, although they are there and there are a lot of problems, but those problems are not announced. They're hushed in Ukraine and Lithuania. We cannot show real situation as it is now. It's not communicated. And I'm trying to talk about this in different offices, different governmental. I do a lot of activism, and in Ukraine just as the same. And I am investigated in Russia for what I'm doing. I'm getting more Ukrainian than those in the Western Ukraine. In Lithuania, Ukrainians go to Russian schools, and they get more Russian. So we have so many different problems, but there's no round table. Yeah, we do communicate with the Ukrainian embassy, but it's far in between. And I think that's where Ukraine loses now, because there is no information support. So the money is not necessary. The information is needed. Information policy is needed. So I'm trying where I can to communicate. You know, people who know me, but there are also such people in other countries, but there's no support. So there are a lot of issues, but they don't get resolved. So they keep talking, but nothing's happening. And so things we're doing on our own accord. So it's hard to to resolve this on your own. Right. Thank you so much. Officers and colleagues, my competence is the cheapest weapon of mass distraction, and I'm talking about communication. 2020, I left the diplomatic corps and I joined the armed forces as a volunteer, and I went through all the stages in our staffs, command, and now I'm in the general staff. I'm managing communication. For 6 months I was acting as a press officer of the chief in command, and I can give you clearly what we have achieved in this and what we are still not achieved in this. So of course, all those things that you raised, all those issues that you raised, we had this opportunity to finalize the pool of those presentations. Of course, there is still chasms that are not covered. That the war started since 2014. Then the question of survival, we had to focus on this. But as from our colleagues from Lithuania, from Caucasus, and our Balkan friends, all those things, we continued doing them, and we did achieve some success. It's not enough. There's still no comprehensive communication where the ministries, the presidential office, we see that there's no such effective system that Moscow has. Just a short example. You remember the situation with MH16, a passenger, and in an hour, the aircraft that was shot down, and in an hour, Russia is already communicating that this is the aircraft with the prisoners of war. So the question, how can we resolve this? And I want to thank the Kharkiv colleagues, because the same problems that you were talking about we have when we work with journalists, but we managed to do it. So people in uniform who maintain journalist ethics, all the Western journalists maintain journalist ethics, they see anyone in the uniform as a propaganda machine, but we did have the mechanism where we can follow this narrow line between pro-Ukrainian narratives and independent journalist ethics. So it's hard to regulate bureaucracy, of course. There are significant hurdles. We are working on more effective things, but we have to do it on all the levels that we can. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ilya. It's important because information weapon is no less scary than the nuclear weapon. So we have some time now, and we left it for Q&A. I know that we had some questions from the audience. I was working in the OSCE from Kurakhova to Popasna, and just as what you're saying now as the Ministry of Defense of the U.S., talking to the Congress, saying that it's not Russia attacked Ukraine. And Germany was saying the same thing, Angela Merkel. I personally said, 2014. I saw a column of 20 Russian tanks, T-64, sitting to me, next to me, General Staff, Russia. He says, we don't have any such tanks, because we all moved them to Ukraine. And I say, I'm writing in the report, I saw so many tanks. They call me to Kiev and say, no, there's British and German officers. They say, you don't have to corroborate, you don't have the evidence that they were Russian tanks. How do you know they're Russians? So there were guys from Siberia sitting there and say, no, you don't have evidence. It's nothing new. As for gratitude, gratitude is in all the scriptures. So when the Czech Republic or Germans say you don't have gratitude from Ukraine, and I say, do you provide tanks? Give us some more ammunition and we will put Czech Republic flag and gratitude slogans. The same about Ukraine. If you want to earn sympathy, if you want to earn support from the West, only you can organize this and earn it. Nobody is doing better than you, like issuing gratitude to someone. I've been working for many years in politics and diplomatic corps. I know how it works. Only yourself. I asked the Americans to put at least 100 flags in every M701. But why? Because when I worked in Washington, believe me, Americans themselves, I remember there was a South Korean president. The South Koreans, they quickly put everything, all the flags. They do it themselves. Yeah, they agreed with the mayor's office, but people organized them. So, nobody will do it for you. And people have so shut off from everything. Ukrainian war is for them something far away. If it wasn't for the events in the US, in a year nobody would know what's happening. So remember the year 15. So like the Balsov operation, and you travel to Kharkiv and say there and there, because my sector was the Balsovo, and there were battles there. And in Kharkiv, what war? What are you talking about? They said. That's the human nature, you know. People don't want to listen about war. Because now it's even easier. Before you had to write material. Now it's just simple, clear things. That's the phenomenon. Whether it's good or bad, I don't know. But TikTok works better than Atlantic Council in politics. Because most people are watching TikTok. They are not reading political or other serious publications. Yeah, so I understand. We have 2 vice presidents of global policy. No? Okay, so we want to thank everyone for participation. We want to thank our interpreters. Inform, we want to thank for them for their organizing, and everybody else for being with us, bearing with us, and for the interesting proposals that were expressed. I agree that we need the new defense union. We are ready to contribute our knowledge and skills to facilitate this. And yesterday we were thinking in between ourselves and decided to publish the materials of this conference. Each of you will receive it. We will send to governmental structures, send to the diplomatic corps. So once again, thank you and have a great day.